Hi, welcome to the Elle Russ Show, where I deliver content intended to inspire, educate, and motivate. Engage with me online at elleruss.com and on social media. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, today I have a great special guest. She's actually one of my favorite authors. I have reread some of her books many times. She has so many, it's hard to count. Peggy McColl. She is a world-renowned wealth, business, and manifestation expert, as well as a New York Times bestselling author of Your Destiny Switch, Master Your Key Emotions and Attract the Life of Your Dreams. Over 26 years using her Power Life Script process, which we'll talk about, she just has a very unique, intimate understanding of the universal laws and really has been showing people all over the globe how to manifest any result they desire in their personal and professional lives. And so welcome to the show, Peggy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elle. I'm so happy to be here.
Was I right? Do you have 19 books at this point?
I do. I'm working on 20 right now.
Oh, I can't wait. As a fellow writer, you are also an inspiration to me in that way with just how prolific you are. I want to, before we get into this topic of manifestation, the power of the subconscious mind, a lot of my listeners, they already know this topic a little bit, but, just to give people that may not get it, can you give the elevator pitch of what does manifestation mean using your thoughts and emotion? Can you give us a little bit of a snapshot for people that might kind of have a hard time defining it?
Well, I love that. I think it's such an important question too. And, the thing that I discovered myself is that manifestation is not complicated. It's a rather simple process. But the reason why it tends to be a little more challenging is because we're so habitual. So manifestation really involves making a decision on what you would love, understanding that you don't have to know how, and that it could literally be anything within the realms of nature. Of course, I can't go up on top of a 20-story building and think I'm going to fly and safely jump off the building and land somewhere. So I want to add that little aspect to it. But really what it involves is getting your thoughts and your feelings or emotions in harmony with the goods that you desire or the outcome that you desire. So what does that mean? It means you feel as if, act as if, think as if what you desire is already in your life now. Simple, right? But the challenge comes from the habitual way of being that we all are. And that's the reason why I had created the Power Life Script process in the first place. But essentially, I believe manifestation is making a decision of what you would love and then immediately determining what is it going to feel like when I have that, or I'm doing that, or I'm being that, or I'm experiencing that. And then the way to attract it into your life is to stay in harmony with it, feeling and thinking as if it's already here. And that's how you manifest.
On that note, because I want to go through a few of these concepts and get your opinion on them, I've noticed that so when people hear feel like the feelings of already having it, they say to themselves, well, that feels like lying, right? It's pretending. And I always come back with, right, but we pretend constantly in the negative, don't we? Like how many times have we all used our imagination and conjured up emotions about something we fear ahead of it happening? Most of the time it never happens. So we're always kind of doing it in the negative in a way, but somehow when you suggest it in the other, people are like, I don't know, that's kind of like lying to myself. Do you get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's so true. And again, that's part of the way we're raised. That's part of what our conditioning has been, because that's the way our guardians were, our parents were, our teachers were. And so by the time we're, an adult, we've already been programmed to think that way and feel that way. So anything unlike it is going to feel unnatural.
I think the people also get tripped up as well with when they're manifesting, or let's say they're doing a gratitude list and they wake up every morning and they write the things, but they're not spending a moment to feel the feelings of how, right. And so can you talk about how important that is and why the connection, because as so many people have said, right, this is a feeling universe, not just logical thinking vision board, right? So can we talk about why those two have to be synced up?
Yeah, absolutely. You see, it's like there's a book by Neville Goddard called Feeling is the Secret. And I believe that the title of that book is really the answer to not everything, but it's an answer to the manifestation process. And a lot of people, and I've seen it myself from people that have come to my events, my seminars, clients, they're very proud of themselves for doing the things like the gratitude, the visualization, the affirmations, those kinds of things. but yet they're not connecting the emotion to it. You see, we attract based on what we're feeling, and our emotions are energy that's sent out into the universe. And by being in harmony, which means to feel as if we have that which we have, we're going to attract it. And, I've got so many stories of that I've manifested things, what some people might say, like literally out of thin air. Yes. But following this process, so if I'm writing in my gratitude journal in the morning, I'm happy and grateful for something, I take the moment, as you said just a few seconds ago, Elle, I take a moment to really connect to, if I'm writing, I'm so happy and so grateful, I'm feeling the happy and I'm feeling the grateful. And the same thing with any affirmations I do or visualization techniques or anything like that. And that makes a difference. It makes a big difference.
Yeah. I also want to talk about a few trip ups in law of attraction manifestation that I've noticed with people. And I went through myself when I first learned it many years ago, which was, okay. So I'm sure you've heard this too, where the concept, of course, of, listen, let's say you have a job that you don't like, but if you keep poo-pooing it, you're probably a little bit further away from the getting one you want. You have to find ways to be grateful about it. And then people's objections are like, well, but like, if I'm grateful for it, the universe might make a mistake and think I like that job and keep me in it. You get what I'm saying? And can you address that? Because the universe doesn't make mistakes. It goes along with your feelings. It knows you don't want that job. But again, there's people that are almost scared to like put gratitude towards something like that, even though they don't like their current job, but they're like, they're like unwilling to find anything to appreciate about it. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, it's like a kid, who's just no movement there, right? They're stubborn, As you're asking that question, I was reminded a number of years ago, my husband and I had bought this house, and I've got lots of dream home stories because I'm a dream home manifester. And this particular home that we had bought was several $1 million, and it was quite an extraordinary home. It was a custom built home. It had won awards and all of that. And we had bought it, we moved in, and from day one, stuff started breaking. And we started to realize, that there were some things in this house that just weren't right or weren't working properly. And even though that had, doors flown in from Germany or whatever, I don't know, like all these real fancy things, that many of the things in the house weren't working. And I'll give you an example that it had heated floors and they weren't working. And it had, oh my goodness, just so many things. And every day, after we moved in, there was something wrong. And I started to make a list after about 2 months. I made a list of all the things that were wrong. And it ended up being about 63 items. And I sent it to my real estate agent. And I said, just want to let you know what's happening since we've moved into this. We were calling it a hell house, like our house from hell, right? And one day I had to go out, something else broke, and I had to go out and get something, and it was an interruption in my business day. And so I went to go out and I put the key in the door to turn the key. The key turned, but it got stuck. And I couldn't unlock the door or lock the door, and my key is in the door. And I remember I was on the phone at the same time with my husband, and I kicked the door and I said, I hate this house. It was just like, I want to burn it. And I was like, I was having a fit, and the fit I was having was like, I'm going to burn it to the ground and like that kind of thing. And it was probably what they called the breaking point. Right. And I remember telling my friend, I'm going to sell this thing. I hate this thing. I'm going to go and call the realtor and get it back on the market. And I don't care what I sell it for. I'm just going to get rid of it. But we fixed everything. And my friend had come over and she said, you will never sell this house until you love it.
Right.
Right. And it's kind of like what you're talking about with someone who wants another job or whatever. And I knew she was right. I teach this stuff, right?
Sure. You just couldn't see the forest for the trees at that point. You were just so involved in the hate. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, okay, so we fixed everything, got all the electronics working. It was all one of these high tech homes with everything was a push of a button or on a app on a phone or whatever. We got everything working. And she told me, you got to fall in love. I was like, I sort of fell in love kicking and screaming,
right,
if you will. But I did. We started to really enjoy it and appreciate it. And it was a beautiful home and all of that. And then on the 1-year anniversary of moving into it, the realtor called me, and I thought he was calling to say happy 1-year anniversary. And he called to say, somebody wants to buy your house. And it's like, well, what do you mean? It's not on the market. And he said, well, they saw it before and they are very interested. Would you be open to showing it to them? It's like, yeah, bring them in. And so I set a price, which was more than what we paid because I wanted to recoup all of my costs. Sure. and the real estate commission and the transfer fees and all of that. And so I set a price, and my husband said, well, we're only going to do this deal if we find exactly what we want to buy, because we don't want to be homeless. And the realtor said, they'll never go for that, never go. And I said, well, ask them. And we decided to just stay in the spirit of this is all going to happen perfectly harmoniously. And they agreed. They paid us our price. We found another home. It was the first one we looked at. We fell in love. We bought it. Boom, we moved. And so there's an example of, even though it wasn't appealing to fall in love with something that we were obviously very upset about, but we did it. We had to push it aside, and it took a little while, but we got there, fell in love, and then sold it.
Right. The moment you truly sort of like were just in love and appreciating it is right when, again, someone showed up and asked you to sell it. You did not have to even put it on the market. On that same note, sort of on a house thing, one of my coaches years ago was in the process of selling a house in a bad market at the time. But he had a goal of like, I want to sell it within 3 months. And he realized midway through, he shifted his thinking. Instead of thinking about like where he was going or the act of selling it, he started to imagine what it would be like if somebody came in and like, this was their first house, or this was their biggest house they've ever gotten before. And just started to like feel the feelings for them of how they would feel looking through that window and like how happy they would be. And he just sort of like shifted the focus, you know what I mean? And It did sell to the day actually in 3 months. And I thought that was kind of interesting because often we're focused right on what we're doing. I guess the same would be in terms of, I forgot who suggested it at one point, but the idea of like relationships, for example, instead of putting out and, of course, definitely imagining who you want, the list of things, all of that, starting to flip it and go, who's going to be excited about me? Like there's someone out there that's looking for me. How happy are they going to be when they find me? Like flipping the roles there.
I like that. That's a really cool idea. I actually had another house story. Do you remember back in 2008, there was something going on called a recession? I didn't participate, but I heard, right? So there was a recession going on, and I had bought a house in Florida, previously. And so my husband and I were out for dinner. I remember it was Valentine's Day. And I said to him, honey, I think I'm going to sell the house in Florida. And he said, now? And I said, yeah, we're not using it. Like it sits there empty, it's just not being used. And he said, like, it's probably one of the worst times ever to sell a house because of what was going on. And of course, as I said, I don't participate in these recessions. So I called the realtor down in Florida that had, helped us buy it. And I called him and I said, I'm interested in selling my house. And he's like, do you get television up there in Canada? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, what about newspapers? I said, yeah, I get TV and newspapers. I don't really pay attention to them, but yes, we get them. Why are you asking me? And he was being kind of sarcastic, obviously, and a little arrogant. And he said, you realize we've got a recession going on down here, right? And I said, yeah, but people still buy houses during recessions. And then he asked me, he said, well, how much do you want to sell it for? Or what do you want to list it for? And I gave him the price. And he said, you realize you'll be the most expensive house on the street? And I said, it's the nicest house on the street, so why would it matter?
And also I want to be like, well, this lack of confidence in this real estate guy.
I hear you. I was thinking the same thing. Like, and it was like that. It was like a push pull. I really wanted to get the house listed, and I finally said to him, do you want to list it or not? Because if he didn't, I'm going to call somebody else because I'm listing it. And he said, okay. He said, I'll get the paperwork together and I'll email it to you. So he did. And then I wrote out on a little index card, I'm so happy and grateful that I've sold this house within 2 weeks of listing it for full list price. And it was a quick closing. And that's what I wrote on this little card. And of course, I became emotionally involved in that outcome. And within 2 weeks, the house was sold, closed, and the woman down the street had bought it.
I love that. And
Yeah.
when you talked about, so for the people out there that maybe like, give me a little bit more detail in that emotion of it, were you feeling like the elation of like having them call you and say, we got it, we sold it at your thing, and you're feeling the celebration feelings? Like, give us a little more juiciness into what that meant for you, the emotion of it.
Yeah, definitely. It was a feeling of just joy, relief as well, because it was a property that I owned in another country that I wasn't able to take care of. So that was a big part of it. Seeing the funds come back to me, all that cash, because I bought it cash. So it was fun to see all the money coming back in. And I mean, for me, it was a wonderful goal and it was a short-term goal. But when you ask me that question, I think back to when I decided, and we're probably going back to 2007, when I decided to become a New York Times bestselling author. I created visuals to represent that, but I remember constantly feeling the elation of being a New York Times bestselling author, what that would feel like, and seeing my book on the list, and just seeing the royalty checks come in from Hay House and all of that. And I remember the day that my literary agent called me. It was a Monday. My son was actually just coming home from school at the time the phone rang, and I picked up the phone, and she told me, she said, "Hey, Peg, I just want to let you know that your Destiny Switch made it on the New York Times bestseller list." And I was jumping up and down like on a pogo stick. but I remember thinking this thought, I don't feel any different. Like I did not feel any different. And the reason why I didn't feel any different is because I had already been embracing the feelings.
You were already in the future and living your future. Yeah.
I was living it already. It was, I allowed the future to become a present fact, and I was celebrating already. So when it happened, I remember standing there thinking, well, this is odd, and it shouldn't have been odd. But I just remember in that moment that I had that thought, there is no difference. And Neville Goddard has said this in his teachings. He said, the reason why people don't accomplish their goals is because they don't feel it naturally. You got to feel it like you own it. You got to feel it like it's yours, and there's no other choice, no other option. And that's more of a natural kind of feeling.
Yeah. On the heels of that, another trip up I'm thinking of that people have is they put out the manifestation, right, of whatever that is. And then they keep looking for it all the time, which seems synonymous with resistance and lack of faith that it'll show up, right? You know what I mean? Can you elaborate on that? Because, and I guess this is why a lot of teachers, and sometimes even myself with people, will say, hey, look, start small with something you don't even care about. Like you just want to manifest a free cup of coffee, because you're going to throw that away and forget about it. It's not going to be like, where is it? Where's the coffee? You know what I mean? But even if you are like that and you're like, where is it? Where is it? That where is it is really a lack, right? Can you elaborate on this sort of conundrum that people have a little trouble with when they're
yeah, for sure. I think if you think about a tug of war, like a rope, with a bunch of people on one end, a bunch of people on the other end, and like I used to, when I would speak on stage, I mean, it's pre-COVID, obviously, sometimes I would bring a big yellow thick rope with me, and I talk about the tug of war that goes on within someone, and this helps them understand why they're pulled one way and then pulled backward and pulled forward and pulled backward. So if you decide you're going to accomplish something or manifest a particular goal in your life, and you set the intention, you stay focused on it, you see yourself with it in your life, and remembering you don't have to know how, you do not have to know how, you do not have to know how, but you must feel as if it's already there, then you're in full on manifestation mode. However, if you start to look at present results, which, dictate it's not there yet, or you start to think, when is this ever going to happen? Because you're feeling frustrated, or you're starting to get worried, well, what if it doesn't happen? You're going backward, right? So anytime you're thinking something that's out of alignment, which would be, oh my God, maybe this isn't going to happen, or why is it not happening yet? Or maybe I just, not meant to have this, or whatever. You're going backward, right? You're going backward. And then if you do your visualization, let's say, and you're seeing yourself with it and you're emotionally involved in that, then you're moving forward. But then in the next moment, you're thinking, wow, when is this going to happen? Like it's already been 3 weeks, and then you're moving backward. And so this is what's going on. And people don't notice and they don't know or understand that they're going forward and they're going backward. They're going forward, they're going backward, they're going forward and they're going backward. And they're wondering, why am I not getting anywhere? Because of the struggle. So what's necessary is to have the dominant thoughts and feelings directed upon the outcome as if it's here. So it's not that you're not going to feel maybe a little bit frustrated or have some worry or whatever. You simply have to notice when it's there. And when it's there, shut it down, like bam, as fast as you possibly can, because it's destructive mode. It's pulling you in the opposite direction. How long do you want to go in that opposite direction? I would say shorten it by just having the conscious awareness to notice, make a decision, and get back in alignment. So I've got tools and strategies that I use for that, and they're simple, but they work. And so I think that's a big bit of the push and the pull, or the forward backward kind of movement, and that's why it occurs.
Or the getting involved with, right, the cursed house, this planning. And I always look at it like it's limiting an otherwise unlimited universe, but it seems crazy because we have this plan, like, well, how are you going to get there? How are you going to do that? Right. That sort of social construction on it. Like, you've got to plan for it. One of my favorite things, and we were talking right before the show about Mark Allen, who I interviewed, was I love that when he was like, 30 and broke and trying to figure out his situation, he wrote down like the business plan. All he had for the business plan at the time is something that nobody would even think was a plan. All he put down was just talk to people who know about business. Like, sometimes that seems insane, right? People would go, that's not even, but it's something. It was actually smart because he was a dummy about it. And he was like, look, I don't know, maybe the first step is that. It doesn't have to be big or huge, right? But just something. And I think people would discount the small steps like that even.
Oh, absolutely true. And there's always someone, that's out there that's been there, done that you can learn from. And there's so many mentors. We think about books. We talked about books. Books can be a mentor. Videos can be a mentor. Or podcasts can be a mentor. There's so much that we can learn from others. When I first became an author, I was ignorant, and I mean, not knowing, not rude, but I was really ignorant about what it takes to be successful as an author, because it was my first book. I'd never done that before. And so I actually had an ignorant assumption that if you write a great book, the buyers will come. Well, that's not what happens. And so, I decided, okay, well, I obviously don't know what I'm doing because I wasn't getting any results in the very beginning. So I decided I'm going to find somebody who knows about marketing books, and I'm going to learn from them. And Victor Hansen, who had co-created the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, was running these book marketing events called, what were they called? Book marketing. It was called book marketing or something like that. And so I decided that's where I met Arielle. We were talking about Arielle Ford. Mm-hmm. She was on stage at that event. Of course, she had done a lot of publicity for big name authors. And I went to this event. I sat in the front row, and many of the speakers that were there became my friends because I thought, these guys know something I don't. They've produced results that I haven't yet. I'm going to learn from them. And a number of the speakers on stage were offering different programs, continuing education, I believe is what some people call it. And my credit card was smoking by the time I got into that place. I bought everything. And I did, I came back home and I just started implementing strategies online because I didn't want to be vacant from my son's life. My son was young. And I decided I'm going to do this. I'm going to become a successful author from the comfort of my home. So I started marketing online, and I've never looked back. That's why Mark Allen became a client of mine, and many others like Wayne Dyer and Greg Braden and Marianne Williamson and Neale Donald Walsch. All these guys became my clients because I got in early and started marketing and started producing amazing results. And they wanted to do it too, because they were used to the older traditional ways. So I think it is important to learn from those that have blazed the trail before you.
Can you talk about the where people get tripped up with being specific, right? So for example, it could be like, they're constantly changing their taste. They're not sure. Maybe I want the Range Rover, but what if a new one comes out, and is the universe going to get it wrong? And so that question of how specific should you be, or is it better to be more elusive? Like, say, I want a luxury 4x4, like a Range Rover or something better, because I know that trips people up. They feel like they have to nail it exactly right. And then they look at another Zillow house and they're like, maybe that's the one. I don't know. You know what I mean? And they get confused. And they're like, I don't know. I'm not sending out the right signal.
Such a good question. I think you answered the question with the question, actually, because exactly what you said is that if you know specifically, like I remember my husband and I were watching golf one day on one of the PGA tournaments, and there was a commercial on for a Jaguar F-type car, convertible car. And it was one of those times where my head turned. It's like, what was that? I mean, it was like hot. It was like, this car is gorgeous. And I'm not really that, I mean, I like cars, but I'm not that girl who gets her head turned by a car. But that one turned my head. And I remember another time we're sitting out in front of our house and we're sitting on the porch, and this car went by, and I was like, whoa, what was that? And it was the Jaguar F-Type. And so I knew I wanted one. So I went to the dealership and I drove it first to make sure. And then I wrote down, this is going to sound funny, but I wrote down that I'm so happy and grateful that I own my Jaguar F-Type convertible in the Italian racing red. I love changing gears, hugging the corners, because I love changing gears, like standard transmission, hugging the corners as you go around, wind blowing through my hair. And so that became a goal of mine. And I had called the dealership and I said, I want to order a, Italian racing red with a standard transmission. They said, they don't come that way. I said, what do you mean? So you can't get a standard transmission. I was like, what the heck? That's a hot car. Like, it should have a standard. I didn't, it was only automatic. So I was like, okay. But I never lost sight of the goal. I kept the goal. And I think it was 2 years later, they came out with a standard transmission. And of course I bought one. And I was driving it. So I would say this: if you know specifically what you want, then specifically declare it. But if you don't, and you'd be happy with a luxury SUV, and if it's a Range Rover or something better, perfect. Then say that. Same thing with houses. Like, you don't have to know exactly, it has to be on this street, facing west, that kind of thing. Be flexible with what it is. But what's most important with manifesting, as you know, is about the emotions. So think about, how does it feel now that you're in your dream home? What do you love about it? Do you love the high ceilings? Do you love the big windows? Do you love the spaciousness? Do you love that you have, every guest room has its own ensuite bathroom? Like, is that something that you would love? Or do you want it with the triple or quadruple garage? Like, just write down some of the specifics that you would love in the home, and then you'll attract it. You'll find it. So
it's so interesting too with manifestation, when you really leave it open and you're like trusting in the universe and you're just going, I don't care how it shows up, because do you even care how it shows up? Like, if someone handed you that Jaguar versus you buying it, that would be better, right? So you don't need to figure out how to get the money for it, like all of those different elements. And I got, some of my favorite ones in life, and I'm sure yours are, when you leave it open and it comes in a way that you're like, I couldn't have even designed this if I wrote it out in my best efforts.
Exactly. That's the part where people don't understand, when the instructions are be specific. Don't be specific about how it's going to come, because that's the universe's job. Be specific about what it feels like. Be specific about what it looks like, if you have some specifics around that. And just as you're saying that, I think about when I decided to attract my soulmate husband into my life, and I'd been a single mom for a number of years, and was loving it and having a great time dating and things like that. And I just decided, okay, it's time. And following, all the things that you're very familiar with, and I am as well, what does this relationship feel like? What is he like? Not what does he look like, but what is his, what are his values like? And how do I feel when I'm with him, and all of that. So I had made a very clear decision. It was time. And I went out and walked my dog one day. But actually, even let me step back for a moment. When I decided I was going to meet somebody, a couple girlfriends of mine said, where are you going to meet him? And I said, I don't know. And they said, well, are you going to be going online to some of these online dating sites? They were fairly new at that time. And I said, no, not interested in that. They said, well, are you going to go out to the bars? And I said, no, I don't do the bars. And so they said, what do you think? He's just going to knock on your door? And I said, I don't know how I don't know. It's not my responsibility. Maybe he will. I don't know. So I went out one day and I was walking my dog, and I just went around the block. It was a big block, and there was a dog tied up on the front lawn of this house. And, dogs are like, right? One dog sees another dog, they gravitate toward each other. So my little doggie was running up to see this little doggie, and it was a home where somebody was moving in. And this gentleman came out the front door, and I glanced over and looked at him and thought, oh, that looks nice. He's handsome. I mean, it was just like, nummy. And then that was the thought that I had in my mind. And we just started chatting, and we ended up going for a walk around the block. And but I don't know, a few days had passed, and my doorbell rang one morning, and it was him.
He showed up at your damn door.
At my damn door. Exactly. So he came to the door and he said, hey, listen, I actually just got called to fly the Prime Minister. My husband used to fly the Prime Minister of Canada, like Air Force One in the US, only Air Force One in Canada. And so he said, I just got called. It's kind of like a last minute urgent, got to go and fly, but I can't find a dog sitter for the dog. Would you mind taking him in? I said, sure, bring him in. So Denny went off and he flew the Prime Minister, came back. It was a day trip, came back that night to pick up his dog, and he came in for a coffee, and the rest is history. I mean, we've been married now for almost 15 years, and that's how I manifested him.
Now, those are great stories, and you've shared a few, but you have so many in all of your books of other people you've coached. Can you give us a couple of those, like, because that's a little bit, the one you just gave is a little like, oh my God, that's literally like magic. That's amazing, right? What are some of the other like, oh, I wouldn't believe that, but it happened kind of stories that you love?
Yeah, I have a client that I met a few years ago, and she had come to an event that I was speaking at, and she specifically came to that event. There were other speakers, but I was there. She came to meet me, and we spoke afterwards, and she came on as a private client, a private mentoring client. And her scenario was that she had been married for 25 years. Her marriage was in shambles. She had run a business that previously had been generating multiple millions of dollars. They had gone through the recession. They were on the other side of it, but they had debt, like 7 figures in debt. And she wanted to leave her husband. And her children weren't talking to her. They were mad at her because, how could she leave daddy, after all these years, especially now, when they were in dire straits. And so I started working with her, and I did teach her about the Power Life Script process, because she wanted to completely transform her life, even though everyone was alienating her and just ignoring her. But now she is running a 7-figure business, profitable business. She's completely turned her finances around. She met and married her soulmate. I was the maid of honor in their wedding. And she lives in a beautiful, stunningly gorgeous home on the water, actually about 7-minute drive from my house. And her life is completely transformed. And she did it by, creating the right mindset and, paying attention to her emotions and listening to her Power Life Script. And now she's completely transformed her life.
Give us a little taste of Power Life Scripting.
Yeah, well, Power Life Scripting is that to understand how we work as an individual is, we're programmed, like our subconscious mind has programs in there that really create the autopilot experience that we're on. We're habitual creatures. We tend to do the same things, think the same things, say the same things, act the same way, have the same behaviors, and of course, produce similar or, results. And so when we want to change that, we got to change what's in our subconscious mind, and we go through our conscious mind to do it. So the Power Life Script is really a process of first deciding what would you love? What would you love? Understanding this, you do not have to know how. So forget that, don't allow anything to hold you back from claiming what you would love. And then you think about, well, what am I going to be seeing, feeling, experiencing once I have that? So you want to make it alive, right? Create some aliveness to it. And that's why in my Power Life Script with the Jaguar, as an example, when I adjusted my Power Life Script to reflect that I own that car, I talked about going around corners, getting on the freeway and hugging the corner. The wind's, the roof is down, the wind's blowing through my hair. And I just love the sound of the engine. So in the Power Life Script, you want to write it in the present tense so that you feel as if you're experiencing this life now. You want to make sure that it does create, you can use word pictures, so it creates images in your mind that you're seeing the result. And of course, you want to record it with lots of enthusiasm. So if you're saying that I am so happy and you're saying the word happy, feel happy as you're saying it, like really embrace all of those emotions and say all those emotions. This is how you create a very effective Power Life script. But understanding that you do not have to say in there, and I work with a lot of clients, a lot of entrepreneurs, you don't have to say, okay, I'm getting 100 clients a day, and that means I'm selling X number of books, or I've got this many people in my program. Like, forget that. What's the outcome? So you write it based on outcome. And I've changed
because it's all for a feeling, right? Like you might want the house and the money, but why? Oh, because I want to host dinner parties because I love that, because I like gatherings. And okay, great. Then imagine that, right? Not the specifics of how am I going to get the house and how much it's going to cost, etc. Right?
Yeah, and enjoying it. Like I've manifested so many things by doing that. Like I remember one time I wanted a waterfront property in addition to our home. And my husband didn't want any part of that. He was like, why would I want two homes? That means I got to take care of another home. I said, well, why do you assume that? And he said, well, grass needs to be cut. And I said, we just hire somebody. Like, you don't have to do anything. So, he warmed up to the idea. But when I had the script written of us owning this waterfront home, I talked about the close proximity to our home because I didn't want to drive hours to get there. So that was important to me, that it was facing west. So we had the sunset in front of us, that we could hear the sound of the loons. And I love
the sound of the loons on lakes. Oh.
Yeah. So, and we heard the sound all the time, and that we'd have crackling bonfires outside. I mean, that was a big part of our experience, and that we were enjoying it and sharing it with our family and our friends, and, creating wonderful memories. And that we had our boat and we go for boat rides, or we take the kids skiing, or I bought Sea-Doos. We had all the toys. And so the vision in my mind, really included all of that. And if I happen to, see a picture or hear of something that would be really fun for us to have, I would add it. And, I did that for a long time. And what's funny is in my script, I talked about how my husband was constantly saying, thank you, honey, for really, encouraging me to do this, because he didn't want it in the beginning. So, and he didn't know I had written this. So we finally bought this place. It was on the water. It was gorgeous. We loved it. And we were sitting out on the deck one night, and my husband turned to me and he said, thank you. And I said, thank you for what? And he said, for convincing me to buy this place. And I started laughing, and he's like, what are you laughing at? I said, I wrote that in my Power Life script. And he's like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. And I was, and that's happened on so many occasions. Like one of the things that I used to have in my Power Life script is that I was sharing the stage with Bob Proctor. And I met Bob in 1979. He's a good friend of mine. And I'm not an employee of his organization or anything like that, but I love speaking with him. I love doing things with him. And so prior to COVID, I was speaking at almost every single event that his corporation put on. And we were in Hawaii one time. And I remember he had organized this event. It was called the 1% Club. And it was a very high-end program that he had. And I knew he was going to be doing it. And I had gone into my agenda and I blocked off the dates. I had not been invited by him. And, but I had every intention of going. And the tuition to go to this event was quite significant. And so one day it was a Saturday, and my phone rang, and I looked at the phone. It was Bob. And he said, what are you doing on August 12th? And I chuckled, because I was already there. I was in Kona, Hawaii. I was at this event. I was speaking at this event. So I laughed, and he goes, what are you laughing at? I said, I'm going to Kona, Hawaii. I said, are you calling to invite me? And he said, yes, I'd like you to come and contribute. You can speak.
You're like, what took you so long? I've already been there for the past week.
I even had my flight booked. I didn't have my flight booked, but I had the time blocked off in my agenda. So we're in Hawaii, and he's in front of the audience, and he's saying to the people in the audience, he's introducing me. And he's saying, I just want to introduce you to this woman I met, how many years ago, back in 1979. And he's introducing me, and he's saying, she's not an employee, but yet, I have her speak at all my events, we're good friends. And what he was saying was almost verbatim what I had written in my Power Life script.
About how he would introduce you?
It was just about because what I wrote in my Power Life script is that, Bob and I are really good friends, that I speak at all his events, even though I'm not an employee of, and so he was saying things like that, which, was putting a big smile on my face. Confirmation again. It still pleasantly surprises me when all this stuff happens.
It's so fun. And I think sometimes some of the small little ones are almost like even extra special because they're just like the little imprinting of the magic again. It kind of keeps that spark going, when like,
Yes,
it could be something really dumb. I wanted a grill pan, like for the top of the stove, and which is like anyone can go get that for $20 on Amazon. And I was looking at some and I couldn't decide which one I wanted, but I was like, whatever, like, cause in my mind, I was like, well, whatever, I'll get that. I mean, it's $20. Like I'll figure it out. I'll just look at it again. And then 2 days later, a friend called me who was moving to the East Coast and he's like, hey, you want to come over? Can you help me move some boxes? And also I have a bunch of stuff to give away. And we go in there and there's a brand new unused grill pan. And he's like, and I love it's just those little things because, and what to me that proves is there was no resistance to me believing that I would have a grill pan. Right. Because it was so believable, it was so affordable, it was obvious, it was a matter of, but yet I didn't have to buy one. It landed in my lap. And I love those little ones sometimes too, because they just keep that spark going,
Absolutely. And that really speaks to the part of you don't have to know how it's going to happen. And you're familiar, Elle, with the story of how I manifested my first dream home.
Can you share that? That's really amazing.
Yeah, it's such a great story. So that was at the time when I was going through a divorce, which was, an emotionally challenging time. And I had decided I'm buying another house. And my husband was like, what are you going to buy it with? Because we were trying to sell our house and we just couldn't sell it. And, but I didn't allow that to get in my way. Like I don't allow circumstances or present circumstances to dictate what I'm going to do or not do. And so I would go looking at houses and he would constantly criticize me for doing so. But in my mind, I was going to own a home and I had a goal card written out. I'm so happy and grateful now that I own my beautiful home. My son and I are living in it and we love it. And I described it and what it felt like living in it. And then I had heard about this draw that we have in our city where you could buy a ticket for $100 and the grand prize was this beautiful dream home. So I heard about this draw and I decided I'm going to go check out this dream home. And I drove to where it was located. And I was amazed how much this home was a lot like what I had described on my goal card. And so I went and saw it. I visited it. It was open 7 days a week. People could go there and buy tickets. And it was to support the Children's Hospital. And so I began visualizing this as my home. I wrote the address on my goal card. And I would visit that home multiple times. Like I knew every inch of that home and I would go into the home and I would sit on the furniture and I would just close my eyes and I'd visualize and I'd go in every single room. I'd sit at the kitchen table. And even though there was a lady there that was selling tickets, I just imagined she's visiting me. And I was doing it all in my imagination. I went into the formal dining room and I sat at the head of the table and I imagined having Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner. And I could smell the turkey and in the oven and sat in the formal living room and thought, oh, we'll have, coffee here after dinner or whatever. And then I chose which room would be my son's. And I went into the master bedroom and I laid on the bed and I just looked at the ceiling and thought, this one I'm going to see when I first thing in the morning. And then I went into the big ensuite bathroom and there was a big Roman tub in this bathroom. And I jumped in the tub and I laid down. I had my clothes on, but I laid down in the tub. And it was all for the sake of really anchoring in the feeling of this is my home. This is my home. This is my home. And so the draw was set for December 7th. And I remember it, like it was yesterday because I was waiting for the results. And Dr. John Goodman won the home. So what most people would do at that point is they would just give up on their dream or give up on their goal. But I understand that we have to detach from the outcome. We have to detach from the way it's going to happen. And I just decided, okay, well, it's still going to happen. And we can't force things to happen either. We have to let. Let is a big word. And a lot of people aren't really good at letting things happen or allowing things to happen. And so a few months had gone by. I was still focused on owning a home. The matrimonial home that I was in at the time, we had decreased the price, still couldn't sell it. And then one night I was at my brother's cottage and I just woke up in the middle of the night and I had this sensation, and I don't know, it was a voice or what it was, and it just said, go to the house. And I knew what it meant. It was a feeling, go to the house. And the next day I drove by this dream home on my way home, and there was a for sale sign on the lawn. And I thought, oh boy, that's a sign for me. This is a sign for me. That is my home. That is my home. So I called the realtor And I said, I want to see the home. And I told my friends who lived down the street, I said, I'm going to go see this home. And the husband said, what for? I said, what do you mean? He said, you don't have any money and you've been in that house, I don't know, 100 times. And I said, the realtor doesn't know that. And he said, yeah, I guess you're right. So I went to see the home again. And this time, as he put the key in the door, I just imagined, I'm home. I'm coming home to my home. And so I thought, I'm going to find a way. I don't know how, but I'm going to find a way. And I booked a second visit and I brought my son, and he was 2. And so I could see my little son running around the home. So that create a greater image in my mind. And then a couple of days later, I'm driving by the home again, I guess like a stalker. And I'm listening to some audios in my cassette deck. And one of the audios was talking about the philosophy of stretching. And the philosophy of stretching is that if there's something that you want, you go for it. It's not for what you get, it's for who you become in the process. Like the biggest, yeah, isn't that great? Like the biggest benefit when you stretch yourself and you go for the goal is, yes, you're going to accomplish the goal, but the bigger benefit is who do you become? And so I realized that I have the potential to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I believed I could. And I trusted enough in the universe to believe that this was going to happen. It was going to manifest. And I had no idea how. And I was feeling a whole lot of fear because I called the realtor and I said, I want to make an offer. And an idea just literally popped into my mind. And he said, okay, I'll meet you at the house. And he met me at the house, and the furniture was all inside the house because it had been furnished and decorated. It was the dream home. And the guy that won it didn't want any of it. And of course, I said to Charles, how about you just keep our matrimonial home and I'm going to go buy something else. I don't even want any money. And he's like, giddy up. Like he was
right. Like, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And so I sat down with the realtor at the kitchen table and I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to move in 2 months. I'm going to pay 10% of the purchase price in 2 months. And then I'm going to close the deal in 6 months, but I'll pay him an occupancy fee until the 6 months. And the realtor's like shaking his head, like, what the heck is this? And I said, well, it's a legitimate offer. And he said, well, you need to write, a check for a couple grand minimum, at least to show good faith. I didn't even have $2,000 in my bank account. So I wrote a check for $2,000 and I ran to the bank and I took a cash advance on my Visa to cover the $2,000 because I wanted the deal to go through. I did not put any conditions on the deal. It was a full on, no conditions. This is how it's going to happen. And he accepted it. And so I had bought myself a house. Now I had to figure out how to get the money to move in. And I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. I just told Charles, I'm going to be moving out in May. And he's like, okay. And I said, I don't need any of the furniture. None of it. You keep it all. And he was like, this is awesome. This is too good to be true almost. And so he was fine with that. And I chatted with a good friend of mine named Val. And Val was somebody who was also into personal development because I had just incorporated my company at that time. I had been studying for about 15 years at this time. And, I knew enough to not, converse with negative thinking kind of people. So I was talking to Val about it. And she said, do you have any money in a retirement plan? And I was young, right? A retirement plan. I said, well, I did put some money away, a few years ago, but I don't even know how much is there. And she said, well, call and see if you can withdraw it because, a retirement plan is an investment, but a home is an investment too. See if you can withdraw it. So I called the guy and I said, can I withdraw it? And he said, well, I'll see if how we can do it that'll be least amount of tax implication. Like, in other words, you pay the least amount of tax. And so he called me back in about a day and he said, here's the amount that you're going to get. And it was exactly to the dollar what I needed. Exactly.
It's so funny how that happens sometimes. And that's when you really know that this magic is really real. I call it magic because it seems like it, but right. It's so funny how it's almost like to the dollar. This has happened so many times with so many people. And I love it. It's almost like the message is like, yep, here you go. It's proof. Yeah.
But that was only 10% of the price, right? I mean, I got in. So now I'm in, now I'm paying this occupancy fee. And then that's when it was like, oh my goodness, like my emotions felt completely out of control. This is where the whole idea of the Power Life script came to be, because I realized that I was really out of control because I started thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get kicked out of here. I'm going to be on the street. Where the hell am I going to live? And I was like, okay, well, I know that thinking isn't going to get me to where I want to go. So I would just stop myself and say, okay, what would you love? Well, I'd love to own this home. What does it feel like? Oh, it feels great. I feel relieved. I feel happy. Okay, go straight to feeling. And I would do that multiple times throughout the day. Stop myself and just say, what would you love? What would you love? What would you love? And then I recorded this Power Life script where it was me talking about how amazing my life was. And I would listen to it over and over and over again, like really programming my mind. Now, at the time I had a job, I had incorporated my company, but I was doing part-time seminars. But I started working for a company that was the very first internet startup company. And I mean, this is before people could even spell www. It was all right. It was all new. And so this company had decided to go public. As an employee, we were given the option to buy shares, and they were non-restrictive, which meant that we could sell them when the company went public. So I had started saving some money, and it was a fraction of what I needed. And when I heard about this, I it's like a roulette table, right? I'll put everything on number 9, you know, kind of thing. And so I said, okay, I'm putting all my money on the stock. And they were scheduled to go public in October, and my deal was closing December 1st. That was the final close date. I had to have the money for the house. And so they were going to go live or the IPO was going to go off in October. And what happened was they felt that they weren't ready. They moved the date to November 26th. And my house deal was closing December 1st. So I contacted the broker who was doing the deal. And I said to him, okay, if I sell my shares on the 26th of November, when do I get my money? He said 4 days later, which would be amazing. The 30th of November. Well, I had a lawyer who was, doing the deal on the house, and my lawyer had called me and he said, Peggy, you need to be here on the 30th of November with the money in hand so we can close the deal. I said, yeah, no problem. And so on the 26th of November, the company went public. The stock went skyrocketing. I sold it at its peak, and I had all the cash 4 days later and closed the deal. And there were some champagne bottles going off that night, some corks.
Oh, the whole story along the whole way, the whole like up to the last minute. Oh, right there, it gets saved. Oh, and again, shifting your thinking, pivoting constantly in those moments when you started to have a few fears or doubts or like, oh God, what was I doing? I've over manifested. I've really, and then it just got turned around right away.
Yes. Oh, it was such a blessing. The thing that I find though, is that, a lot of times, as you said, Alice, these things happen last minute. I'd really like them to happen sooner than that, to be honest.
Sure.
But, they happen nonetheless. And it's just wonderful, the power that we all have.
I've been listening to Darn Easy, which I love. Oh. And what I loved is that, I don't know how you describe this, but it's a bit of what you described about how you recorded that like power life script for yourself in that moment with the house. Is it at the end of Darn Easy where you sort of just go on I love that. I don't know what you call that, but you sort of like, I want to replay that over and over again. It's like you're like affirming for us. How'd you describe that?
Yeah, kind of like a treatment, and I use those myself. And I think the first treatment, if you will, that I ever learned was Louise Hay in You Can Heal Your Life. Because she talks about, reading things and the repetition of things and loving yourself and all of that. And like I remember it was 1985. And I don't remember it right now off the top of my head, but I read, this treatment that she had written in her book so many times. I had retyped it and printed it out and framed it, and that it just became, common knowledge. And I remember in 1988 buying Og Mandino's book, The Greatest Secret in the World, which is based on The Greatest Salesman in the World, where there's scrolls for success. And in that book, Og Mandino suggests to read a scroll for a period of, I think, 5 weeks, and you read it 3 times a day. And I did that for 2 years. And until you become one with the scrolls, like the messages of the scrolls. And the whole idea behind it is that it's impressing it, right, through repetition into your subconscious mind until it becomes a part of who you are.
I love that. Before we sort of close it down a little bit here in the next 10 minutes, can you touch a little bit on sort of the demand principle?
Yeah. It's funny how the demand principle is really in some ways the word demand, people think of demand, they think of somebody being bossy or arrogant or whatever, but it's really a feeling of certainty is really what it is. And there's a story in the demand principle that I share about Napoleon Hill. So Napoleon Hill had written Think and Grow Rich. He didn't have a title for it yet, but he had written the book and he had invested years in the creation of that book because he had interviewed 500 of the most successful people in the world. And so the book had been submitted to the publisher without a title. And because Napoleon Hill knew how important, because he told a story in chapter 6 in Imagination about how important it is for the title of a book, he knew it was very important to have a great title. And he hadn't determined or decided on one yet. So he had, throughout the process of writing the book and completing the book, he came up with about 500 different ideas for titles for the book, and none of them felt right. And so one day he gets a call from his publisher and he says to him, Napoleon, you got to give me a title for this book because I'm going to press tomorrow. And if you don't give me a title, I'm going to give it one myself. And Napoleon said, well, what would you call it? And he said, I'm going to call it Use Your Noodle and Get the Boodle. And Napoleon says, no, you're going to ruin me. You can't. So Napoleon Hill said, I will give you a title tomorrow. So do not use your title. I'm going to give you a title. So Napoleon said that he went to his room and he sat on the edge of his bed. And it's like he's talking to the divine or the universe or God or whatever. And he just said, like he screamed it. He said, I demand the perfect title for my book. But then at the same time, he relaxed in the knowing that he already had the title.
Yep.
And so, he did it with lots of emotion, but basically what the demand was, this needs to be done. And I demand it be done. And he went to bed that night and he woke up at 2 a.m. and then boom, Think and Grow Rich. He knew immediately that's the title. And so he called the publisher in the middle of the night and said, I've got the title. And the publisher loved it. But there's an example of demanding something. So demand it's like where you expect it. I think it's blending the law of expectation with a goal, like you just expect. So when you make the demand, it comes with such a sense of certainty that this is, and it's not arrogance. It's not, being rude or anything like that. It's just really a depth of certainty.
Well, and it really resonated with me because among all the things I do, I've been an actor in Hollywood for a while, sometimes active, sometimes not, but it had been a while. And I was like, I need another credit, damn it. And I did the whole demand thing. I was like, you know what, universe, enough is enough. Okay. Yeah. You're bringing this shit in and like I had a whole, I'm talking to myself and my subconscious, obviously too, but some people would be like, ooh, no, you can't bully the universe. And I'm like, I'm not bullying you, but I use that. And that's why it really resonated with me. Kid you not, of course you'll believe it. But 3 days later, I get a call for an audition for a great comedy show with my comedy heroes that I would love to be on called Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which is still on television. And I went in there, bingo, jingo, jango, booked it. It was like so quick. And I was shocked by this, right? Because it was almost the first time I get, there's something in me that naturally was like, come on, this is, and I just was like, no, you're bringing it. Like you're bringing it. Again, it was just that like expectation, it's going to happen, but it had that little level of like a little tinge of aggression and demand to it. And some people would be like, you can't bully the universe. I'm like, well, but it worked though, a little bit. And you might call it bullying. So I resonated with that when I saw your book, because I was like, that's worked for me too. And it came really, really quick as well.
Oh, I love that. I think that's a beautiful story and a great example of demanding something. As you're saying that, I'm thinking about Sylvester Stallone and think about, when he first wrote Rocky, and, we've heard the stories of how he had to, how to let his dog go. I think he sold his dog, actually ended up trying to buy it back, or maybe he did buy it back.
Yes.
But he had written that script. And, one studio had bought it and said, okay, we really like it, but, they saw someone else playing the lead role. And he said, you can't have my script unless I'm the lead actor. And they're like, we don't want you. And he says, well, I demand that I'm the lead actor in this movie, or you don't get the movie. He demanded that. And look what he created.
Yeah. And what's funny about the Rocky thing is, I think for so many years, for all of us, we had no idea he wrote that.
Right.
Everyone
That's
thought,
true.
oh, it's just some like dumb jock actor who's a boxer. And I think, years went by and you're like, wait, what? He wrote that? Like, it was just, yeah, that's a really great story. So tell us, I mean, of course, we'll put how to connect with you in the show notes and all of that stuff, but tell us, because you have great programs on your website. You also offer private mentorships with not only you, if there's space available, but some other people. Tell us a little bit about how we can benefit from you other than your books.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of free stuff too, like huge amounts of free stuff. And I'm always doing free trainings and live events. And so I would suggest go to peggymccall.com, PEGGYMCCOLL.com. That you'll find links to free stuff on there. Make sure you download some of that, because we constantly keep our friends, family, our connections updated on things that we're doing. I just wrapped up some free training recently, so we do it regularly. I also have, online on Facebook, we have a group, Manifestation Family, where we do live events every week. So that's the best way.
Yes, I just requested to join that group today. And you also have lots of other great programs like the Complete Author Program. I mean, you are obviously a prolific author, so that's wonderful for people as well. There's, what is it? It's because I teach a writing program and I was looking at statistics, it's 80% of Americans alone want to be writers.
Yeah. And you know what, when I first became an author, as I mentioned earlier, I was really ignorant about what's really required to be successful. And a lot of people think you write a book and that's it. And
nope, that's like the easiest part.
It's the easiest part. You're right. And that's when I went to Victor Hansen's, book marketing event. And I heard one of the speakers say, if you've written your book and it's out there in the world, 5% of your job is done. I'm like, what? And he said, 95% of your responsibility is marketing. And so, yes, I have the Complete Author Program, but I help authors, like create sources of income too, because there's so many authors that leave money on the table. And I love earning money. I've been a money earning machine for years, and I love teaching people how to earn money. So that's a big part of what I teach in the Complete Author. That's why I call it the Complete Author Program.
I love that so much. I really, gosh, I could just talk to you for hours, and I'm so honored to have you on and chat with you today. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and we will put everything in the show notes to connect with you. Is there any sort of lasting story or a little hint or a bit of advice you'd like to give the audience on manifestation before we leave?
Yeah, one of the best things that I found that really makes a difference is to help others with manifesting. Like when you're the source of what you want to have in your life, when you're helping another, only good comes back to you. So find a way to help another, and you're going to find that good's going to come back to you. And if you're interested in manifesting, learn about manifesting and help other people with manifestation. You're going to find that you're just going to get better and better and better at it.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone else, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.
Hey, listeners. Over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my #1 source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/Elle Russ for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products, and I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.